What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? This is one of my favorite poems by my favorite poet, Mr. Langston Hughes. I want you to think about this question for a minute. What happens to a dream deferred? When you have an idea that comes to you, right? And typically that can be at any moment, when you're in the shower, when you're in the bathroom, usually when you have time to yourself that comes to you while you're brushing your teeth. What is the first thing that we usually do when a dream comes to us? We go ask someone else what we should do. We say, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is something I should do? Does this make sense? And what usually happens when we ask someone to tell us whether they think our dream makes sense? Well, they tell us, be more realistic. They tell us, what about your family? What about your friends? What about the people that are relying on you? Right? They tell us, that doesn't really make sense. You already have a job. Why don't you just work hard at that job? And that dream slowly begins to turn from a cheer of excitement to a low tone to a whisper, and it fades. And we may forget about it, go back to our jobs, go on with our lives. But it never really dies, does it? It may fade away, but that dream never really dies. And that is the voice within. And that's what happens every time we don't listen to that inner voice. When you're a child, people ask you this question, especially adults, all the time, right? They say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And what do you want to do when you grow up? And as a child, you have a solid, concise idea of who you want to be. You know exactly what you want to be when you grow up. And that is your voice within. That is where dreams come from that voice within. But as we grow up and we become more realistic, we become more grown up, we become more adult, we start to lose our sense of dreams and gain a sense of reality. When I was a child, I remember my biggest dream was I wanted to become a veterinarian. I just knew I would become a veterinarian no matter what. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I remember sitting at my mother's computer and typing up my letter to the ASPCA. If you're not familiar with the ASPCA, it's an animal rights and advocacy organization that shelters animals in the New York City area. So I wrote to them and I said, I'd like to work for you. Of course, I was only 7 or 8 years old, so I couldn't really work at that age. But the president of the organization, of the association at that time, wrote me a letter and sent me a book. Like, this whole package was a book, and it was really encouraging, and it kept my fire going. It kept my dream going. It kept that spark burning. But then I got to high school and I started taking biology, and we started doing dissections of animals. Remember that? And we started, having to take these very complicated tests. And I remember there were these classes called advanced placement or AP classes, where you could take AP biology, AP chemistry. And when I got to college, I had to do all these labs and wasn't doing as well as I thought. So I stopped dreaming about being a veterinarian. I stopped thinking to listen to that inner voice, and I let it fade. And I became more realistic in my life. You know, we have all of these things like Flashback Friday, right? That hashtag. We have that hashtag Throwback Thursday. I want to challenge you today to think about your own Flashback Friday and Throwback Thursday to your childhood dream. What was it that you wanted to be when you were a child? Who was it that you looked up to, that you aspired to be like as a child? That's what I want to challenge you to ask yourself today. And then I want you to think about how much of that dream have you started to listen to? And how much of that dream have you let fade away? And then ask yourself why. And all of us, we all have a piece of that dream that's still in us, that still lingers within us. When that moment happens when you're doing something and you feel so excited and you're totally enraptured in that moment. It could be anything where you feel like you're right where you need to be. And all of a sudden, what happens is you have this spark back to that childhood dream where you thought about every single day what you wanted to be when you grew up. Go to that moment. Sometimes we have to write it out. Sometimes we have to meditate it out. Sometimes it's so deep within us, that dream, we've forgotten about it. We've suppressed it for so long that we can't really remember what it was. Well, honey, I encourage you today to do some soul searching. Yesterday, I went to my mom's house for Thanksgiving, and I was faced by, how your parents have all these pictures of you up. I was faced by all these pictures of me from my past, from my high school age, from graduating from college, graduating from graduate school. And I looked at that girl and I said, who was she? And I saw a picture of myself when I was young. And the interesting thing is, when I look at myself when I'm little, I know exactly who that little girl is. She was spunky, she was sporty, she knew exactly what she wanted, she knew exactly who she was. But over time, that girl faded. Just like my inner voice, my inner dream started to fade. And for me, when I ask myself to tap into my own dreams, right? Because it's normal to grow up and you develop other interests and you get into another kind of career. But there's something about when you were little, about who you wanted to be. There's something there that tells you a lot about who you are. And I know for me, while I discovered I didn't want to operate on animals, I knew that I was an animal lover at heart. I was someone who really took solace and felt at peace when I was around animals. So when I got into my 20s, I started volunteering in animal shelters. When I had my own business, I was a dog walker for over 2 years. I did dog sitting before, and now I have a beautiful dog of my own. And every time I look at her, it reminds me of my childhood dream. Sometimes the dream that we have as children is very precise, and we feel at times like, oh, maybe I let that childhood self down. Well, there's so many ways you can still talk to that inner voice, and you can still talk to that inner child, and you can still discover what kinds of advice does that inner voice, does that inner child have to give you about who you are today? What does that dream that you had as an inner child, what does that dream have to deliver to you as a message for your present moment, for who you are now? Listen to that. I encourage you, write about it. Talk to your parents, talk to your siblings, talk to people who knew you as a child. Revisit your pictures as a child. Ask yourself, who was that person? And how am I honoring him or her or them today? It's in there. And I encourage you to bring it out. I encourage you to listen to her. Listen to him, listen to them, listen to that voice. That is at the core of who you are. You can change your life because you can get into the habit of listening to that voice within and revisiting those childhood dreams. Because those childhood dreams are messages from your inner self of who you truly are. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful, amazing day. And remember, you can change your life. It all starts with you. Enjoy your day.